Okay, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to Return of the Remnant. We're going through the book of Revelation. We are now in chapter 13, and I've got to say that I have a lot of information to try and share. I'm not going to make this long. I'm trying to keep these teachings under an hour, but as always, we're going to continue reading out of the Hebrew Revelation. And I'll try and put a link to Amazon on that. You can get all the background of what this is about and why I'm using it. I'm also going to be reading out of the New Revised Standard Version, Oxford Bible, to get another flavor of this particular chapter in Revelation, as well as today I'm also going to read Daniel chapter 7 to get us a little more background, because as I said before, many things that we read about in the book of Revelation can be found through other sources, especially the Tanakh, but also in the Apocrypha and other manuscripts. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. You remember last week I ended the teaching, or within the teaching, I explained how the Hebrew Revelation is worded a little bit different. And not only is it worded a little bit different, but the verses and chapters are a little different as well. For instance, chapter 12 of most translations go to verse 18, whereas here it just went to verse 17, and then verse 1 is a little bit different. And you're going to see that there are some discrepancies. Now, that doesn't mean that one particular version is superior than the other, but I think that if we go through multiple versions, we may be able to get a little bit clearer picture of maybe what John saw and wrote down in the book of Revelation. So let's go ahead and we're going to read that. I'm going to read the Hebrew version first, and we'll probably talk a little bit about it, and then I'm going to get to Daniel chapter 7 and then some further commentary. Okay, Revelation 13, and key in on this because this first part is very interesting. And so this I is John, and I stepped on the sand of the sea, and I saw an animal coming out of the sea, and he had 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns were 10 crowns, and on his heads were names of reproach and blasphemy. And the animal which I saw was like a horse, and his feet was like the feet of bears, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great might. Then I saw that one of his heads was like a deadly wound, but the wound was healed, and all the world was astonished because of this animal. Then they prayed to the dragon, who gave the animal power and dominion, and they prayed to the animal and said, "Who is like this animal, and who is able to make war with him?" And it was given to the animal to open his mouth and speak astonishing things and reproach until the time of the 42 months was completed. So he opened his mouth to blaspheme against Yahweh and against those who dwell in the heavens. And it was given to him to make war with the set apart ones and to overcome them, and all the peoples and nations and all those who dwell on the earth prayed to him, those whose names was not written in the scroll of life of the Lamb who was slain from the beginning of the creation of the world. Whosoever has ears must hear. If one drives another into prison, he will go into prison. And if one kills another nephesh with the sword, he will be killed by the sword. And here is hope and the faithfulness of the set apart ones. Then I saw another animal coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like the lamb, but spoke like the dragon. And he did great wonders before the first animal, and made that the end, and those who dwell on it pray to the first animal, who was healed of his wounds. And he made fire fall from the heavens before man. And he seduced the sons of man with his signs and wonders, and said to those who dwell on the earth that they should make a carved image for the animal that had the wounds of a sword, but was healed. And to him it was given to give the carved image of the animal a ruach and nephesh, so that it was able to speak. And to make that whosoever does not want to pray to the carved image of the animal, that he be killed. And he made for them all, the great ones and the small ones, the rich ones and the poor ones, the slaves and the freed ones, a sign on his right hand or on their forehead, so that no one is able to buy or to sell unless he has this sign on his hand or on his forehead, or the name of the animal or the number of his name. Here is wisdom and understanding. Whosoever has insight needs to reckon the number of the animal, for it is the number of a man, and the amount will be found. It is 666. And that ends the reading for that. And I think I just want to share a couple things in it, and then I'll read the other version. Let's see. So interesting how this version says, and I stepped on the sand of the sea. So I, John, and we're going to read in another version that it's a little bit different. To me, it really doesn't make that big of a difference, and you'll see why in a little bit. And the only other thing that really stuck out at me was, interestingly, in the Hebrew manuscript that was translated into English, for the 666, this number is written with spelled out words in the main text, which I do see. The margin has this number written with letters employed as numerals in different script than the main text. So we have a Tav, Resh, Samik, Vav. So literally, the Tav representing 400, the Resh representing 200, the Samik representing 60, and the Vav representing 6. And the commentator in here wrote, this is the standard way to indicate 666 with Hebrew letters as numerals instead of words. So I find that very interesting. That's interesting. So now I'm going to go to the New Revised Standard Version, and I'm going to read this. So in chapter 2, verse 18, it would have said, then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. So just like we have here in Revelation 13, verse 1, in the Hebrew, it says, and I stood on the sand of the seashore. But now we're in this version, in chapter 13, verse 1 says, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horn were 10 diadems. And on its heads, and I'm sorry, I'm going to start over right here, but I want you to keep these first verses in mind, these first 3-4 verses in mind, because when we go into Daniel 7, you're going to see how this is drawn from the text. Chapter 13, verse 1, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. So a lot different than the horse. We have a leopard here. But anyway, I digress. And the dragon gave it his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its mortal wound had been healed. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. They worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who can fight against it? The beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. It was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all the inhabitants of the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. Let anyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive, into captivity you go. If you kill with the sword you must be killed. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast that rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it makes the earth and the inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound had been healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of all. And by the signs that it is allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives the inhabitants of the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. and it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person. Its number is 666. And I believe also about this part about wisdom, I think this is like it's the same as Shimshon or Samson back in the book of Judges, that it's a riddle. It is a riddle. We have to understand what is this 666 and try and figure it out. So before I get into Daniel chapter 7, one thing that I wanted to share is last week we read Revelation 12. And one thing that, as we go through this, we read one chapter at a time, there are some areas where it's probably even more profound if we read more than one chapter in a particular area. And this particular area more likely would be better read if it was chapter 12 and 13 together. And I'll tell you why. Last week, as we were reading Revelation 12, I explained that we were in a chiastic structure. And this was speaking of the dragon, aka Satan, and his angels falling from heaven, trying to devour the man-child, then basically going after her seed. And at the end of Revelation 12, it says, verse 17, then the dragon, aka Satan, was angry with the woman, aka Israel, the whole house of Israel, all the tribes, wherever they've been scattered throughout the earth. And he went off to make war on the rest of her children, the rest of her seed, those who keep the commandments of Elohim and hold to the testimony of Yeshua. So, and it says, then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore, and that's how that ended in this version here, the New Revised Standard Version. So you should ask yourself when you're reading this and you're finishing reading chapter 12, the question should be, then if the dragon is going to go make war, how does he do that? How then does he go and make war against the rest of her seed? And Revelation 13 is the answer. Revelation 13 is the answer to that question. The dragon wants to make war on the rest of her offspring, and he is going to use his Antichrist to fulfill that by giving him his authority. Satan's going to give him his authority and dominion over the earth. Remember that Yeshua called him the ruler of this world in John chapter 12:31, and in a couple other places in John. And we know that Satan tried to give Yeshua that authority when he tempted him in the wilderness. You remember that? And obviously he rejected it because, praise the Lord, because the Messiah is not going to succumb to Satan, but he's going to fall in line with our Heavenly Father to do his will. So what I'm getting at here is Revelation 12 and 13 should be read together. So this is why the dragon wants to make war on the rest of the seed of Israel, and how he does it is through raising up the Antichrist and allowing him, giving him the power, dominion, and authority to rule the earth and to inflict a mark on them, and those to put a mark on everyone whose name is not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, in order to go after those that will refuse to take the mark of the beast. So I just want to get that out of the way, because I think that's important to see that. So let's get in now very quickly, because I'm already 15 minutes in, and let's read Daniel chapter 7. Bring this over here. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel spoke and said, I saw in my vision by night, behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. And four beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. And remember, as you're reading this, this has a lot to do with Revelation 13, basically 1 through 3, 1 through 4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. It beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, the second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth that devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there was 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spoke. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, his nails of brass, which devoured, broke in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke very great things, whose look was even more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High. And the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Then he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns of his kingdom, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time. So again, there's the time, times, and half a time that we talked about last week. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey him. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. So we just read in Daniel 7 that there were 10 horns, which are 10 established kings. So before the Antichrist comes up and rises to power, there has to be, in my opinion, what I see is 10 kings that are established on this earth. Because out of those 10 kings, another one starts to show up within those kingdoms. One of them does, which is the Antichrist, and he will rise to power. He will eventually subdue 3 of these kings. He will overpower these kings, and he will have their authority. So then we will be at a point where there will be 7 kings, and then one king would be the Antichrist, which will have the power of 3 kings. So what I just read here in Daniel 7 is exactly what John saw in Revelation 13. Having 10 horns. 10 horns are the 10 kings. There's 7 heads. Remember, the Antichrist has one of the 10. He's subdued. He would be number 11, but he's subdued 3 of those 10 kings. Okay, so now we have 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems. He eventually controls the whole thing. There's a time where he's going to control the whole thing. And on his heads were blasphemous names. That's exactly what the Antichrist is going to do, just like we see in Daniel's dream, his vision in Daniel chapter 7. So let's get out of this. So if we want to compare Daniel 7, Revelation 13, the little horn that Daniel saw is that beast from the sea that John saw in Revelation 13. In Daniel, it says, and he, the Antichrist, which is the little horn, shall speak great words against the Most High. It's the same thing that John saw with the beast from the sea. The Antichrist is going to speak great things and blasphemies. In Daniel chapter 7, and the same horn, that little horn that rose up, made war with the saints. Right here in Revelation 13, that the beast, who is the Antichrist, was given to make war with the saints. In Daniel 7:25, we read that the Antichrist is going to wear out the saints of the Most High. And we see in Revelation 13 that he's going to make war with the saints and overcome them. We read in Daniel 7, verse 20, when he subdued those 3 kings, he was more stout, more bold, and subdued those 3 kings and became over all, just like here, power was given over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And then here we see in Daniel 7:25, when I said time, and half a times, that everything's going to be given into the Antichrist's hand for a time, times, or half a time. And we read about in Revelation 13 that power was given to him for 42 months, or 1,260 days, or 3.5 years. So we see that. We see the connection, what was already given in a vision to Daniel 2,500 plus years ago. And here it's going to come. 2,500 years ago, it was given to Daniel. 2,000 years ago, it was given to John. And we're getting close to the end where we're going to see that. So to me, a lot of things have to happen before we get to that point. I mean, there's a lot of people out there right now that say this king could be the Antichrist, this president of this country could be the Antichrist, and very well could be. But in my opinion, things have to change greatly. And whether it's through war, financial collapse, whatever it may be, where either a new world order like I've got here rises up, where the 10 kings will eventually be 4 beasts. And before that, the Antichrist has to start to rise to power, and we will see activity from this individual before he finally controls the world and then is given authority and power from Satan. But this is kind of what it looks like to me. I found a map somewhere online that shows the North American Union, potentially the EU, the Asian Union, and the African Union, where that may be what it ends up boiling down to. There'll be basically 10 kings within those 4 quadrants. And you can see Daniel 7:17 I have written down here. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall arise out of the earth from the nations and from the peoples. So, and I just put on here, could they be heads of unions? We don't know. So we read in the first few verses of Revelation 13, these beasts that Daniel saw, and also the beasts that John saw. And I will submit to you that what Daniel saw were these beasts that were rising up at the same time. I'm not saying that, and some people believe this, and again, it's just my opinion, but I think it fits better that all these beasts are here at the same time. Not that this beast that was a lion with the eagle's wings was the Sumerian Empire, and the bear was Babylon, and or Egypt. I believe that all 4 of these beasts are all beast empires at the same time. And the reason why I believe that is because in the late career of the Antichrist, when he finally assumes total power and he has all 10 crowns on his head, we see a combination of the bear and the leopard and the lion all together. These 10 kings, as it says in Revelation 17:3, which we'll get to in a couple weeks, these 10 kings have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. This is when the Antichrist is in full control over the earth. Real quickly, I want to go over, there's a chiastic structure just like there was in Revelation 12. We see it again in Revelation 13. We see in verse 2, the dragon gave the Antichrist his power, seat, and great authority. And we see down later in Revelation 13, that power was given to the Antichrist over the kindreds, tongues, and nations, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. We see, and they worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and they worship the beast. Here we see who is like the beast, who's able to make war with him. Later, it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Revelation 13:5, there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. Again, we get that out of Daniel chapter 7. We see another side of this in Revelation 13:6, that the beast, the Antichrist, opened his mouth in blasphemy against God. So there's a thematic connection there again. Several thematic connections. And then the central axis of chapter 13 is that the Antichrist has power given to him for 42 months. And this whole thing of 42 months, 3.5 years, 1,260 days, times and half a time, is given so many time, it should stick out like a flashing red light siren. That is our timeline as believers in Yeshua. The 1,260 days to overcome when this starts. I wanted to share something about the false prophet, and then I may go back over a couple things. Again, I'm just wanting to go through this for the sake of time. I believe that the false prophet that the Antichrist is going to have is going to be a person who will be named Elijah. We have to remember that the Antichrist means in place of Christ. And I believe that Hazatan, who is a great deceiver, is going to do everything he can in his power to present to the world what Yeshua represented at either his first or second coming. Several prophecies related to him, and he is going to do everything he can to try and convince the world that this is the true Messiah. and that Yeshua, who came 2,000 years ago, was a fraud. And we know better than that. We know he was the real Messiah. But to a lot of unbelievers out there and people who don't read their Bible, it's going to cause them to really step back and think. And so I want to show you a couple things here. In the book of Revelation, we read about this deadly wound that was healed. And to me, I think this is going to be symbolic of a false resurrection. Yeshua was crucified, dead, and buried, and resurrected. And I believe this Antichrist figure, Satan's going to do something to make this appear to be a resurrection, because everyone's going to marvel at the Antichrist about this wound, this deadly wound. And to me, this deadly wound, this mortal wound, is a wound that led to death. And somehow this Antichrist was resurrected. We're going to see that the false prophet is going to give Ruach spirit to this image of the beast, in Revelation 13:15. We also notice that in Revelation 13:13 that the second beast, aka the false prophet, which we read about starting in chapter 13, verse 11, is going to have the ability to call down fire from heaven, or at least appear to do that. And if we take a look in the Tanakh, one of the great prophets of the Tanakh is Elijah. And we know that Elijah performed basically through the power of Yahweh, was able to resurrect her son, the widow of Zarephath. We read about that in 1 Kings 17. We also know on Mount Carmel, during the time of King Ahab, he was able to call down fire from heaven, calling down fire from heaven, that Yahweh sent fire from heaven to consume an offering that Elijah prepared, covered in water, a bathtub full of water, if you will. And so we see that. And we know Elijah was instrumental in the point of anointing King Jehu of Israel. And we read in Malachi chapter 4, one of the last couple verses in our standard Bibles, before we get into the Brit Hadashah, that before the great and terrible day of Yahweh, that Elijah will come. And I know Yeshua talked about John being in the spirit of Elijah, but we see here in these verses that before the great day of Yahweh, that Elijah must come first. So very, very interesting here. These are some reasons why I believe that this false prophet is going to fool many people, because many people are going to think this is the return of Elijah. This is, Eliyahu, Elijah is here. And on the Jewish side of things, it may convince the people of Judaism, those that don't believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, but believe in the Tanakh and believe that, Elijah is very, very important. Because if you take a look in Jewish tradition, all throughout a Jew's life, Elijah is supposedly there at the birth of a newborn. He's there on the 8th day at the Brit Milah, the circumcision. He is at every Passover. In many homes of tradition, during Pesach, they put out a cup for Elijah. At the Havdalah, he's there. At weddings, he's there. And I even think even at death, he might be there as well in Jewish tradition. Also, according to Jewish tradition, that Elijah is going to show the people where the ark and the jar of manna and the anointing oil are located at. Interestingly, in Jewish tradition, Elijah is going to be the one that in Judaism that they talk about, who is going to anoint Messiah and declare him king. Isn't that interesting? And lastly, this is what I find very, very interesting. that according to Jewish tradition, Elijah is going to be the one who is going to revive Mashiach, son of Yosef, Mashiach ben Yosef. If you ever have some time, do a little search on the two Mashiachs, Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, and it'll be a lot different than what Messianics and Hebrew rooters believe, with Messiah coming first as Messiah ben Yosef and then coming again as Messiah ben David, Messiah ben David. So something to take a look at there, according to Jewish tradition and Revelation and Elijah. This is why I believe the false prophet more than likely is going to be an Elijah type figure that Satan will use to continue to deceive people. Again, we talked about these patterns in the Bible. We read about today in Daniel 7, the time, times, and half a time being 3.5 years. And this is all based on 30-day months, if this is 100% accurate. We know that Satan's war with the saints, 1,260 days. How is he going to do it? Through the Antichrist that we read about in Revelation 13, when the Antichrist gets to his full seat of power and is given dominion and authority from the dragon, aka Satan, he will then wage war on the saints for 1,260 days, or 42 months, or 3.5 years. We see that there with the Antichrist rule. And then during that same amount of time, I believe the two witnesses, from the moment the abomination of desolation takes place, that very same day as he sits and takes his power and authority, the two witnesses, Yahweh is going to have the two witnesses there prophesying against them from day one. Now, one thing I want to just share, just to take away from this slide, is, again, the book of Revelation is very complex. It's someone who looked at something, and now we're trying to get in the head of that person to try and understand what he saw 2,000 years ago. Now, one thing I can tell you is that Revelation chapter 6, chapter 8, and chapter 9, so chapter 6, 8, and 9, are basically the sequence of events of the seals, or the sealing, and the trumpets, or the judgments of Yah. That is the sequence. And scattered throughout other chapters, such as what we read about here in Revelation 12 and in Revelation 13, are the details of some of those events that we got from chapters 6, 8, and 9. You can see, like in the first vision, Revelation 6 and 13 kind of line up. Now, I'm probably going to go back and redo this, because as I've gone through this more and more, again, as I said before, Revelation is very fluid. As we get more information, we want to be able to be teachable, and we want to be humble in this, so that if we see something, more information, to draw us a better, clearer picture of the vision of what John saw, we want to change with that, if we want to get a better idea of what he saw. And I guess I think that's it for that. One other quick thing I wanted to share in here is in chapter 13, verse 1, and I'm back in our regular Bibles now. When it says in chapter 13, verse 1, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, sometimes two main things I see out of this. Beast rising out of the sea could be a Hebrew idiom meaning the beast coming out from the nations and among the peoples. And we get that in another place in Daniel, I believe. Or maybe it was in Revelation 17. So more than likely, that's what it is. But we also have to understand that this beast rising out of the sea can also mean the abyss. And remember when we read back a couple of chapters ago that there was this king, Abaddon, Apollyon, the destroyer, that rose up out of the abyss. And so yeah, that's kind of interesting too. So you can kind of look at it that way, and I can see where some people would, but more than likely, this is a human being who is living on the earth at this time, and I believe he's living today, right now, on the earth. He's not yet gotten a hold of power yet, and he may not even know, but I believe he's on the earth at this time. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. If I have anything else, I'll put it in the notes. But remember, Revelation 12, when you're done reading it, you have to ask the question, how then does the dragon, aka Hasatan, make war on the saints? We read about it today in Revelation 13. This is how he's going to make war on the saints. He's going to use the Antichrist and the false prophet to subdue all the peoples and to go after Yah's people. So I hope and pray that Revelation 13, you got something out of that. And please like, subscribe, put some comments down in the comment section on some things you saw in here, as we're all trying to learn this together. And again, till we meet next week, Shabbat Shalom.